Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight.
This was a dream job.
Imagine being able to work and serve in the district that gave
Chicago Public Schools CEO announces she won't renew her contract. An exclusive one-on-one with Janice Jackson on why she's leaving the school district.
It's important for us that we have a voice in government.
It's a once-in-a-decade opportunity, redistricting.
Top COVID vaccines aren't accessible in countries like India or South Africa. Some say suspending vaccine patents could help that.
Thousands of COVID vaccines wasted at Walgreens and CVS. That and more from Cranes.
A proposal to change the name of Outer Lakeshore Drive to DuSable Drive is headed to the full city council.
The new president of the Chicago History Museum on diversifying its exhibits, visitors, and more.
And our own Jay Shesky gets friendly, maybe a little too friendly, with a rather large insect. But first, some of today's top stories. Chicago's highly touted expensive ShotSpotter gunshot detection system might not be working as advertised. A new study from the MacArthur Justice Center concludes the vast majority of ShotSpotter warnings led to so-called dead-end police deployments. More specifically, the study says the technology failed to turn up any crime at all. 86% of the times it signaled there were shots fired, and that led to unfounded high-intensity police deployments. ShotSpotter has claimed to be 97% accurate and has a 3-year, $33 million contract with the city. The study reviewed ShotSpotter data over a period of 21 months. Attention developers, the state of Illinois is looking for someone to buy some prime real estate. Today, Governor J.B. Pritzker put out a request for proposals to sell the State of Illinois building, also known as the Thompson Center, in the Loop. A potential sale could bring in hundreds of millions in revenue and help the state avoid up to $500 million in costs to bring the building into good repair. The Thompson Center, designed by famed architect Helmut Jahn, opened in 1985 and houses several state government offices. And Illinois public health officials report a little more than 2,000 new cases of COVID in the last 24 hours, including 28 additional deaths. That brings the statewide total to 1.341 million total cases and 22,047 deaths. The test positivity rate right now is staying flat at 4%. And the state reports just under 17,000 total vaccine doses yesterday. That's a dramatically lower total than normal, but health officials say data from pharmacies like Walgreens, CVS, and Albertsons is missing from that count. And now to Brandis Friedman and an exclusive one-on-one with the head of Chicago Public Schools. Brandis.
Paris, Chicago Public Schools CEO Janice Jackson will not be renewing her contract at the end of June. This comes as the district aims to bring students back into the classroom full-time in the fall, and as 2 other top officials are set to leave at the end of the school year. Jackson's tenure is marked by an unprecedented move to remote learning during the COVID-19 pandemic and a weeks-long teachers union strike in 2019. During a press conference today, Mayor Lori Lightfoot reflected on Jackson's time at the district, starting with when she attended its Head Start program.
First as a student, as you heard, then as a START teacher, a principal, a district administrator, chief education officer, and finally, a CEO. There are not many who can tell this kind of story. Having walked in the day at school as a Head Start student and then leaving at the end of June as a CEO of the same district. It's a remarkable, remarkable story and accomplishment.
And Janice Jackson joins us now. Janice, welcome back. Big day for you. You've called this your dream job. Is this bittersweet for you?
Yeah, Brandis, I mean, of course it's bittersweet. People who know me, like I know we know each other. I live and breathe education in Chicago Public Schools, in Chicago in general. So it was definitely a bittersweet decision. I thought long and hard about it. But I honestly feel like I've done my work. I've served CPS for 22 years, and I'm looking forward to contributing in other ways to public education. But it goes without saying, this has been the greatest honor of my life. How many people get to say they have a dream and actually accomplishment? So I'm forever grateful to all of the leaders here in Chicago that afforded me this, and obviously God for making it possible.
Why are you stepping down, and why now in particular? I think we all know it's a very tumultuous time for schools right now.
You know, I've been in CPS for 22 years, senior leadership the past 6.5 to 7, and it's always a bad time to step down. And so that's one thing that I've learned. But to me, my biggest goal in North Star this year was having our students return to in-person instruction after the pandemic. I've made no secret about how this pandemic has impacted me personally. And I know that it has impacted our students in ways that are, we don't even know, and we won't know until we get them back in our buildings full time. But for me this year, it was really about let's get all of the students back in school who want an in-person option and really lay the groundwork for full 5 days in person for everybody in the fall. And that's exactly how I intend to spend the last 2 months as I wrap up my time here. But there's never a perfect time. But if I had signed another contract, the kind of person I am, I would have felt obligated to give it another 4 years. And when I did that in my calculation, it just felt like now was the right time to make that break. But I want people to know that I am a lifelong Chicagoan. I will be here tomorrow. I'll be here the day after June 30th, and really finding other ways to contribute right here in this city. I love this city. I love the work that's happening here, and I want to be a part of it, just in a different way.
Now, your tenure at CPS, it included the longest teacher strike in 30 years. In that time, even when you were chief education officer, there was a near strike in 2016. Where would you say the relationship between CTU and CPS stand right now?
Well, what gets reported publicly and what it really is always different, right? I mean, I have productive conversations with President Sharkey all the time, but, it's no secret that, it's hard for us to make decisions and get on the same page when it's about, what's going to happen with our kids in schools. And look, I agree with almost all of the issues that have been raised and advocated for by the teachers union around, quality schools and the resources that schools need. I've been very disappointed in some of the tactics and the ways in which politics have kind of taken over that discussion. I think most educators feel that way. And so my wish moving forward is that when a new CEO is selected, it's going to be through a very collaborative process that the mayor's office is leading in support with our Board of Education. I really hope that they give the next person an opportunity to lead and to understand that we can make change, we can advocate and get all the things that our schools deserve without, making a toxic environment, because our kids are watching and we have an obligation to show them that we can do this right and do it well and do it in a professional manner.
Now, we also know your chief education officer, Latanya McDade, announced last month, announced in March, a couple months ago, that she would be leaving. We learned today your chief operating officer, Arnie Rivera, is also expected to leave. That leaves not much of a bench behind the three of you. But do you think this is at all destabilizing for the district or for students as you look towards the fall and what's needed to reopen schools then?
Well, you've been following my tenure here. The first thing I said out of my mouth when I ascended to senior leadership was that I wanted to stabilize the district. Having served in this district, I've seen CEOs come and go, and it was really important to do that. I've worked in senior leadership and the chief ed position, number 2, running day-to-day operations, and now this for almost 7 years. And this team has been there with me. And they have sacrificed, they have worked extremely well, and they're incredibly talented. And I feel like the next CEO has a right to select his or her team, just as I was able to select people who were highly competent, but more importantly, people that I trust. But with that said, it is my obligation to make sure that this transition goes well. And what I'm committed to is working with the board, working with the mayor's office to make sure this is as seamless as possible, because our district needs that kind of stability in order to, really get back on track after a year of kids being out of school. And so I don't have a ticket to anywhere or a place that I need to go quickly. I'm committed to making sure that this transition works well.
Now, much has been said about Mayor Lori Lightfoot's management style. Some have even called her a micromanager. We've seen the two of you work together quite a bit, obviously, over this last year and a half. What would you say?
And everybody's different, but this is what I'll say. Mayor Lightfoot and I have a great relationship. And like any relationship, we have things that we debate about. And that's what I love about her. I couldn't work for anybody who wouldn't allow me to have voice. And what I know to be true about her is that she respects strength. She obviously respects competence. And so I can't think of a single time where even when we disagreed about how to do something, there wasn't a place to have those disagreements. As a manager, I would say she's been very supportive of me. I know she trusts my leadership and she trusts the decisions that I was making. But I think people don't oftentimes see the other side of that. She has been a leader that has taken interest in how I'm doing as a person. I mean, there are times when I call her and she can tell that something's going on and she's like, how are you? You know, and so I have appreciated that about her. I know people will make a lot out of this, but if those of you who know me, you know that I'm a straight shooter. If there was a problem, I would say that there isn't. I have supported her. I will continue to support her. I think she's doing an amazing job under extraordinary circumstances, and she deserves all of our support as she continues to lead this city out of this pandemic.
Janice, your last two predecessors left under ethical clouds. Former CEO Forrest Claypool left after an Inspector General investigation. The CEO before him, Barbara Byrd Bennett, went to federal prison. How much of your job these last 3.5 years has been involved with cleaning up the district?
Well, I don't know if that's the right term, but I think leading with integrity has always been something that's critically important to me. And so it broke my heart to hear people talk about CPS, and there's still some vestiges of that. So it was really important for people to see that, you know, the people who work here, the vast majority of the people who come here because they want to make a difference. And there are amazing people, not only working in our classrooms and leading our schools, but working here in central office. And I just wish the public had more visibility into the kind of conversations, how hard people work, the blood, sweat, and tears that we all pour into this district every single day in hopes that we can just make the lives of each and every student better as a result. And so that was always important to me. My personal integrity is extremely important to me. And so that has definitely guided me. It is a tightrope. You have to watch what you say, watch what you do. It's always, you know, something that you have to worry about. But I showed up for one reason and one reason only, and that's to make sure our kids got a good education and to really give them the opportunity that CPS afforded me. I went from 79th in Racine, Auburn Gresham, to senior leadership here in the city. And you don't get there without a quality education, and the district poured into me. And so for the past 22 years, my service has been about pouring into the next generation of leaders.
What is your advice to the next leader, the next CEO of CPS?
You know, I haven't written that letter yet. I will definitely leave something behind. My advice is the same to all educators, that you have to put children first. And I know that sounds cliche, but it truly is difficult to do for some people in these roles. But I think when you do that, people see that authenticity, and even when they disagree with you, they at least give you the benefit of the doubt, and the door is always open. I'm proud to say that every relationship that I've had to engage in or manage as a result of this role, the door is still open. And that's because people know my heart, they know what I'm about, and they know that I will always do whatever is within my power to make things better for our kids. And so I hope that the next person comes in with that perspective and that philosophy, and to be quite honest, that humility. I learned so much from talking directly to the people who I'm serving, and my wish is that the next CEO has a similar perspective on servant leadership.
And that is where we'll have to leave it, unless you're running for elected school board candidate in the future.
You know, I said that joking earlier.
Oh, good. Just to clarify, you were joking.
Kinda.
Kinda. Stay tuned. All right. Janice Jackson, best of luck on your next steps. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thank you, and have a good one.
It's time for Illinois legislators to get down to the business of drawing new sets of maps that will decide the boundaries for state legislative and congressional districts. A seemingly arcane and maybe pedantic task, but with big consequences. They've got lots of input to weigh. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with more. Amanda.
Yeah, Brandis, although I'm a little distracted, wondering what Dr. Jackson's future is going to be there and whether I'll be covering her as a candidate for office. But as for the current legislators, they've heard from dozens of experts, from Illinois residents and from interest groups about what they want the next set of maps to look like at legislative hearings, including this one that Laura Saeed testified at on behalf of the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition.
Don't make it just about show. Please make sure that you hear us, you see us, and you allow us to have representation.
We've previously gone over what the redistricting process entails and what all is at stake. You can find those stories on the Chicago Tonight WTTW website. But tonight we wanted to give you a glimpse at what the folks who took time out of their work days, even in cases their weekends, to testify really wanted legislators to know. So meet Tawana Pope. She has lived in North Lawndale for 32 years. She works with individuals experiencing homelessness and says that her community has seen some economic development, but it needs more.
We have people returning home from incarceration. We have those who are coming out of addiction. We have those who are in search of certain types of resources. So we need our state representatives here that have already been in the neighborhoods, got to know us, know what our needs are.
Now, a major concern for North Lawndale residents who participated in this process, they want to make sure that the district is kept majority Black represented, and also that legislators, when they're drawing the map, take into consideration the residents who are in prison are not counted in census data as residents of North Lawndale. Now, the leader of the Puerto Rican Cultural Center also wants a legislative district kept intact that currently includes a corridor that runs along Division from Western to Costner.
This is the historical, cultural, economic center of the Puerto Rican community, and has been so since the 1950s, when thousands of Puerto Ricans began to migrate to the city and established La Division as their place.
Lopez says the Puerto Rican community has created for itself a main street, a hub, and that it is important for the integrity of the area, especially as it gentrifies, that it continues to be represented by a legislator who speaks the community's needs. Now, other communities say right now they're divided into too many districts.
And we have district lines that literally run right through the hearts of some of our neighborhoods, which, you know, it divides us. And if we get further divided and we're split up into, instead of being stretched over, 3 house districts, we're divided into 5. And then, instead of being 30% of the voters in a district, we're only 5 to 10%, we're going to be less impactful.
Shlomo Soroka says if the Jewish Orthodox community that is concentrated on Chicago's north side, as well as in Evanston, Lincolnwood, and Skokie, is further divided, then it would be easier for a legislator to ignore their interests. Now, he is not asking that a district be drawn to help to elect someone who is Jewish Orthodox in faith, rather that the Jewish Orthodox community, because of its unique interests, be considered as a community of interest. Now, that is a legal term of art in the redistricting process.
When it comes to the security and safety of our community, Orthodox Jews have become targets of late. They're visibly identifiable as Jewish. There's been an alarming rise in anti-Semitism, and a lot of those attacks have focused on Orthodox Jews. We want to make sure that these concerns are given proper attention.
Now, during her presentation, Saeed told legislators that Illinois has the most Muslims per capita of any state in the nation.
Muslims are every single race. We're in the south side of Chicago, at mosques, at centers, at neighborhoods from Lawndale, Garfield Park, etc. We're in the northwest side of Cook County, where we are South Asians and Latinos, and we are in Peoria and central Illinois. And this community is large, and it is completely zero represented in our state legislature.
Meanwhile, the Asian American Pacific Islander community is also growing.
We know that Asian American communities in Cook County are rapidly approaching 500,000 people, and Asian American and Pacific Islander communities are the fastest growing racial demographic in the United States, which is a trend that we expect to be reflected in the 2020 census data.
But there's a challenge there, that census data coming late from the federal government, meaning that there's a high likelihood that Democrats in the Illinois legislature may well forge ahead with map making before they get that information from the U.S. Census Bureau. This, even despite an overwhelming majority of the experts and organizations that testified at those hearings have said that they want the General Assembly to wait. Brandis, back to you.
Amanda, thank you. And up next, a potential name change for a famous Chicago roadway. Stay with us.
It really is about community where we all come together.
Chicago needs to make space for everyone.
One of Chicago's most famous roadways and the inspiration for an Aliota Haynes and Jeremiah song might soon have a new name. Last week, a city council committee unanimously advanced a proposal that would change the name of Lakeshore Drive to DuSable Drive in honor of Jean-Baptiste Point DuSable, recognized as Chicago's first non-Indigenous settler. The plan, which would apply only to the outer drive from 67th Street to Hollywood, is to move to the full city council for consideration later this month. And joining us now with more are Etzer Kantav, president of the DuSable Heritage Association, and 17th Ward Alderman David Moore, the ordinance's sponsor. Welcome both of you to Chicago tonight. First, Etzer, DuSable is a big part of the origin story in Chicago, especially for folks that watch Channel 11 that has all this great history programming about Chicago. But for those that need a refresher, remind us who DuSable was. And Etzer, you might be on mute there. I think we have you.
All right. So thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be talking about DuSable, our favorite subject. DuSable Heritage Association is a 20-year-old organization that has been dedicated to preserving the legacy of Jean-Baptiste Point DuSable, the Haitian-born founder of Chicago. He was born in St. Mark, in the colony of Saint-Domingue around 1745. At the age of 25, around that age, he migrated to the United States. And first he landed in New Orleans, and later on he found his way in Peoria, where he settled for a while. And he purchased land there, and but as the situation was changing politically, he found it safer to move upward and up north, and he landed in the Great Lakes region in Chicago, in East Chicago at that time. That place was called, and he established himself there. And with the community that he founded with his wife, Kitty Hawa.
And I want to get more into that because his wife was indigenous and native to this area in these swampy marshlands of Lake Michigan, Stinking Onion, or whatever Chicago meant. Alderman Moore, Mayor Lightfoot has talked about potential other tributes to DuSable, like naming the Riverwalk after him, naming that little park right by Lakeshore Drive after him. Why is Lakeshore Drive the right monument to rename after DuSable?
First of all, let me say the mayor's vision and what she's doing is a great compliment to the renaming of Lakeshore Drive, the outer drive, to DuSable Drive. And it's a great compliment, and I thank her for that. But the reason why you have to do that, I tell people I can count the number of times on one hand that I've been to the Riverwalk. Probably some of the residents in my community can count them on no hands. Maggie Daley Park is one of my favorite parks, and I can count the number of times I've been over there. Also, in my community, they can probably count the number of times, no times. What this does, it does two things, well, several things, but it connects the south and the north side, and just the whole entire Chicago. So if somebody's coming from the north and they see DuSable Drive, it raises those questions. Who is DuSable? And then it pushes them, because there's people up north don't even know about the DuSable Museum. And then for the people that's coming from south to north, it will connect them to that Riverwalk as they get to know more about DuSable when they're driving it. And so that it connect them to that Riverwalk. It'll connect them to that park. But more than anything, it's that educational piece. Paris, when I introduced this back in 2019, the number of youth from both Powell Elementary School, Stagg School, and I'm sure some other schools, but those are the two calls that I got, who got so interested in this and saying, I did not know that a Black man from Haiti was the founder of Chicago. That's more important to me than anything.
And Alderman Moore, what about some of the concerns, though, with Lakeshore Drive? It's such a internationally known and recognized brand connected to Chicago that it might confuse folks. It might confuse tourists.
No, not at all. And those are the misnomers. Number one, it's just like the Dan Ryan. You know, we've changed the Bishop Ford. I had to have a thought process to remember what the expressway was called before it was Bishop Ford. And I said, oh, it was the Calumet Expressway. So no difference. But it's like when we try to change things, that gets pushed back when there's people of color, when we're trying to recognize them throughout the city. And so it won't confuse people, because just like when you get off the Dan Ryan, you're still at Wentworth, you're still at Wales. When you get off the outer drive, you'll still be on Lakeshore Drive. So
all right, and I want to get back to the distinction between outer and inner for a second. But Etzer, you were starting to talk about DuSable's indigenous wife. Tell us a little bit more about her and how she'll be honored as well.
Well, and so DuSable married Kitty Hawa, and she's a Potawatomi Indian. They married first into a Potawatomi ceremony, and later on they renewed their vow in a Catholic ceremony. So there was a partnership between the two of them, and so they worked together. And there is a history that not well known in the city, is that at some point during his journey, DuSable was arrested and imprisoned by the British because they suspected him of sympathizing with the Americans. So so they captured him and they put him in jail in Michigan for a year. And after that year, the Indian Chippewa, they descended on the fort and they demanded that the British release.
Etzer, I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. It's a fascinating story, but we're just about out of time here. And Alderman David Moore, we have a couple seconds. Just tell us, will inner Lakeshore Drive still be called Lakeshore Drive and outer drive be called DuSable?
That is correct.
So that's the way the ordinance is now.
That's the way. So there's no addresses are affected. The only thing that is affected are the 3 or 4 harbors along the outer drive.
Got it. All right. Well, our thanks. It's a fascinating history. Our thanks to Etzer Kantav and Alderman David Moore.
Thank you so much.
And still to come on Chicago Tonight, fewer bags lost, but customer complaints take off. How United Airlines fared this past year, and a lot more from Cranes. Many parts of the world don't have access to top-performing COVID vaccines. Some say suspending vaccine patents could make doses more accessible. The new president of the Chicago History Museum on expanding the museum's mission to all of Chicago. And when the documentary My Octopus Teacher won an Oscar recently, our own Jay Shevsky was reminded of his own cross-species encounter with a rather large insect. Oof. But first, some more of today's top stories. A man who allegedly attempted to run over a group of picnickers in Logan Square this weekend is charged with 4 counts of attempted murder. The incident happened on Saturday when 57-year-old Timothy Nielsen allegedly drove his pickup truck onto the park at 2900 West Logan Boulevard and toward the victims who were celebrating a birthday. Prosecutors say one person was struck by the vehicle while attempting to flee, and a woman was hit and pinned under the truck. Both are being treated for their injuries. There's much more on this story on our website. Severe weather expected to move into the area this evening has postponed tonight's Cubs game. All is still relatively calm right now, but the National Weather Service is warning of a severe band of storms that could produce high winds and heavy downpours and possible tornado threats, especially south of the city. The Cubs will play a day-night doubleheader with the Dodgers tomorrow starting at 1:20. And now back to Brandis Friedman and some of today's top business headlines. Brandis.
Paris, thank you. New data shows CVS and Walgreens have wasted more COVID-19 vaccine doses than most states combined. Customer complaints soar for United Airlines during the pandemic, and a proposal for a habitable billboard over the Kennedy Expressway. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane Chicago business editor Ann Dwyer. Ann, welcome back. So data from the CDC shows that Deerfield-based Walgreens and CVS have wasted more doses than states, U.S. territories, and federal agencies combined. What is going on there?
Well, first I should emphasize, Brandis, that the numbers that we're talking about here are not necessarily astronomical. You have to remember that about 150 million doses of vaccine have been put into American arms so far. The numbers that we're talking about in this latest data, however, indicate that about 128,000 of those doses that have been produced anyway have been wasted, and that CVS and Walgreens are largely responsible for that waste. CVS actually is the bigger culprit of the two. It's not entirely certain how this happened, except that most critics and analysts that Kaiser Health News talked to in the report that Crane's published today indicate that the early kind of rocky rollout of the vaccine program under the Trump administration was the likely cause. You'll remember that the feds really did lean pretty hard on these private partners to do this, the early vaccinations, especially of long-term care facilities, et cetera. And in fact, CVS has acknowledged as much and said that most of the waste that they were responsible for took place in this very early period of the rollout. Since then, the CDC is saying that they're working on it and that they're mainly trying to get a window into how deep this problem is.
Okay, so also a difficult year for airlines. United Airlines reportedly excelled when it came to bumping fewer passengers, losing fewer bags, but there is one category where the Chicago-based airline did not perform so well.
Right, and that is in the area of refunds or the lack thereof. United, in customer surveys, has been dinged in particular for its practice early in the pandemic of wanting to give people travel credits instead of cash refunds when their flights were canceled or delayed. And with so many flights disrupted, particularly in the early phases of the pandemic, that was a real bone of contention among the flying public.
Sure. And lastly, a proposal for a habitable billboard. What is that and where might we see it?
It's a wild idea, and it really is only that at this moment, Brandis, an idea. But if it gets momentum, the developer who wants to build it would create a park over Hubbard's Cave at the Kennedy Expressway that would feature a glassed-in 4-story building that could be leased out for public events or corporate marketing campaigns. And you know, with about 100 million cars passing beneath Hubbard's Cave every year, it would certainly be, you know, one of the most prominent corporate branding opportunities in the city.
It would also make Hubbard's Cave known for something a little bit more than the traffic backup that most of us are used to experiencing there.
Exactly.
Ann Dwyer, Crane Chicago Business, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And now, Paris, we'll go back to you.
India has fully vaccinated only 2% of their population against COVID-19. Now, compare that to the United States, which has 32% of the population vaccinated. And on top of a lack of vaccinations, India is going through a major outbreak with more than 368,000 cases announced just yesterday. Now, there are some proposals to suspend vaccine patents for some of the big drug companies like Pfizer and Moderna as a way to help boost production. And joining us with more on this topic are Jacob Shurko, a professor of law at the University of Illinois, and Dr. Aaron Paquette, assistant professor of pediatrics and law at Northwestern University. Welcome, both of you, to Chicago tonight. Dr. Paquette, first with you, remind us of the patent protections that are in place internationally right now for the pharmaceutical companies that have produced a vaccine to this point.
Sure. So patent protections are provided both in domestic settings as well as in international agreements. So parties to the World Trade Organization and members to the TRIPS agreement, or a trade-related international property agreement, have made joint efforts to protect patents for manufactured vaccines by the major companies that are producing in the United States.
And Jacob Shurko, what would the effect be of suspending a patent, and why are some countries talking about this now?
Yeah, so there is some argument that suspending the patents is going to increase the production of vaccines, especially in countries that are otherwise having difficulty accessing that. But the reality is that's just not how patents work, and there's no evidence that suspending them is actually going to increase production in those countries.
And Dr. Paquette, do you agree with that? This idea of suspending patents wouldn't necessarily lead to an increase in production?
I agree that there's not large-scale evidence for the kind of waiver that's currently being proposed, but there is evidence that issuing ability to manufacture vaccine can boost production over time. It's probably it won't lead to immediate availability of vaccine because you need time to make it. However, in a crisis like this, I think using parallel arms to ultimately increase supply is really the direction that we need to move in, and relaxing patent protections will in some way allow for that increase in supply.
Jacob Shurko, if not relaxing patents, as Dr. Paquette said, what do you think are some of the other ways to increase supply in places like India, which have struggled developing effective vaccines?
Sure. Well, I think first it's important to understand what the problem is on the ground. Waiving patent rights is not going to build a factory. It's not going to train workers. It's not going to secure raw materials. It's not going to ensure any of the vaccines that are produced outside of the United States are pure or potent or safe. But that doesn't mean that we don't have an obligation, a moral obligation, and frankly, a financial interest to help other countries manufacture vaccines as an effort to end the pandemic now. That's going to include a lot of direct spending in some of these other countries to do things like build factories and secure raw materials and train workers. That's what we essentially need to be doing. That's going to be a dollars and cents issue on our end, not necessarily a patent waiver at the WTO.
Dr. Paquette, what about that, or the notion of simply sending supplies of vaccine in the United States to places like India, especially as you see demand perhaps start to level off here a little bit?
So like I said, I do think that using parallel efforts is really the way to go. Direct donation of vaccine is an immediate way to put vaccine into arms. And I agree that that's an important step that globally countries that have vaccine available need to take. And even India has promised donation of vaccine to international efforts and supplies to international efforts for vaccine production. But I think that's one mechanism by which vaccines can be increased. While we can't promise that every country to which intellectual property information might be shared with patent relaxation will have the capacity for production, we do know that there are some places like India that are manufacturing vaccine, and providing the blueprints to make even more vaccine could increase their production efforts and could give them an attempt to make vaccines that have demonstrated higher efficacy than the ones that they've been currently producing.
So Jacob Shurko, in legal terms, what's the difference between relaxing a patent restriction and then having one company provide blueprints to other companies to help develop a vaccine?
Sure. I think it's important to understand that two things are just not the same thing. The only thing that waiving a patent does is that frees the person who's trying to develop the technology from claims of patent infringement by the other side. It does not obligate or mandate, and it certainly doesn't encourage companies that have the know-how to produce these vaccines to share that know-how with around the world. The best efforts going forward are collaborative ones with the companies that are currently making vaccines now, as well as paying here for the manufacture of more vaccine that can be shipped elsewhere.
And Dr. Paquette, do you see any collaborative efforts happening right now among some of the big companies, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson? Is there an interest here to sort of step in and help solve this global problem?
I think there's a stated interest, but I don't think we've seen that materialize into actual efforts to ramp up production beyond donation of vaccine. And right now, the number that I've seen talked about is a donation of 60 million from the U.S. But looking at the population of India and those that need to be vaccinated, that's not going to touch the level of need that's currently existing. And I think while Professor Shurko is correct in that the relaxation of the patent really saves from claims about infringement, it is one step in the direction of moving towards freer use of that intellectual property or that information without worry of claims about patent infringement. That might help to encourage manufacturers that have the capacity to build up that supply.
And Professor Shurko, and given what you said about patent relaxation, what can governments do, what can the WHO do to encourage some of these parallel efforts and some more collaboration here?
Sure. So first, as I've mentioned before, we need direct investment with respect to helping other countries build their own factories to manufacture their own vaccine now. I think as Dr. Paquette mentioned earlier, right, that's not going to be an immediate turnaround. Some of these factories take somewhere between 3 and 6 months to get off the ground, but we need to start. We also need to develop techniques for scaling up manufacturing and doing more so quickly. We are at an arms race with the virus. We need to develop billions upon billions of doses of vaccine so many more millions of people don't die. As of right now, the world, generally speaking, prior to the pandemic, produced billions of doses of vaccines, global, for all diseases in the world. We are looking to double, if not triple that, in order to end this particular pandemic against one particular virus now. So we need better technology to essentially do what it is that we're doing right now. In addition, as I mentioned earlier, we need cooperation, not antagonism from these countries, from these companies, in order to encourage them to ramp up production at a sufficient level in order to end the pandemic elsewhere. Doing things like claiming that intellectual property is going to be seized or waiving patent rights, if it were effective, that would be one thing. But if it's not going to be effective, then frankly, it's probably going to be counterproductive.
And this is all happening as variants are spreading, and you see the data that lower and middle income countries are really struggling to get their populations vaccinated. All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Our thanks to Professor Jacob Shurko and Dr. Erin Paquette. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And now, Brandis, we toss it back to you.
Paris, thank you. The Chicago History Museum has a new president. Southside native Donald Lassier has returned to Chicago to lead the museum after helming the Muhammad Ali Center in Louisville for many years. His hiring coincides with a renewed emphasis on preserving and celebrating Chicago's history, especially on the city's south and west sides. And Donald Lassier joins us now. There he is. Welcome to Chicago Tonight, and thank you for joining us. So nationally and in Chicago, many institutions are reevaluating exactly what history is highlighted and how it's told. How do you see the role of the Chicago History Museum in those conversations?
Well, the role of the Chicago History Museum should be to make sure that people understand their history. The entire history of Chicago, which is very diverse. And it's important that we as an institution make sure we show the diversity of Chicago's history, because that way we will be able to demonstrate and show how the history of Chicago impacts people today. And what's more important, Brandis, is that Chicago's history, while it's diverse, it's also something that people should really understand because it's global. When you think about Chicago, we have people from all over the world that has immigrated to this city. When you think about Chicago, you think about the great migration from the South of Black people trying to escape Jim Crow. When you think about Chicago's history, it was a great spark for the civil rights movement. So there's so much to unpack with the history of Chicago that I think it's incumbent on the Chicago History Museum to start that unpacking, if you will, and making sure that everybody sees themselves in the history of Chicago.
So speaking of the Chicago History Museum, you know, it's located in Old Town on the north side. What are some specific ways that you feel like you can broaden its scope and diversify its visitorship?
Several different ways. Community outreach is paramount in our strategy. It's important that we go to the south and west sides and have a footprint there, whether it be holding special programs or special events. But it's important that we do outreach, because just because we have this beautiful, wonderful building, as you said, on the north side, doesn't mean that everybody can get to the north side. I had this similar issue when I was in Louisville. We were located downtown, and many Black and brown people didn't feel welcome downtown. So we had a strategy where we went out into the communities, started programs, and then created partnerships with other organizations in those communities. We're going to do that something similar here in Chicago. Partnerships are key because one of the things that I've found throughout my career, it's important that when you enter a partnership, it be long-term. And the best thing you can do in a partnership is ask for help. And so if we ask our community partners for help in terms of what should we be doing to positively impact the community, I think that will go a long way to demonstrate that we are sincere in making sure that we get visitors from the South and West sides, but more importantly, we are there to help, to make sure that people there understand their history.
Now, the Chicago History Museum, of course, has a very extensive archive of photos from over a century of the city's history. And we asked you to bring a few to share. Thank you for doing that. The first one is of Muhammad Ali at a press conference in Chicago in 1966. Now, he's not someone that is always associated with the city. Obviously, you have a lot of experience with him and his history. But he actually has a lot of ties here, you say.
Yeah, very, very deep ties. He still has children that live in Chicago, in the Chicago area. He spent a lot of time here. He, of course, joined the Nation of Islam here in Chicago. So he has very deep roots here. He lived here for some time. He loved the city of Chicago. He still has great friends that still live here. So yes, he had deep roots here. I'm happy to say that when I was growing up on the south side of Chicago, he was my hero. And not only was he my hero, he was my friend's hero. He was their parents' hero. So, you know, his impact here in Chicago runs very, very deep.
And before we run out of time, Donald, you also chose this 1955 photo outside Emmett Till's funeral, outside the Roberts Temple Church of God on the south side. Why did you select this one?
So I selected that photo for two reasons. The first is it really does show that Chicago was the spark. That photograph, when you think about it, was the spark that really started the civil rights movement. Also, there is a family connection. Wheeler Parker, who was in the house with Emmett when he was pulled out by the folks that murdered him, he is my mother's cousin. So there is a family connection. And so I just wanted to, you know, bring that out and talk about how important it is that people understand what that photo represents.
And we were thankful to have Wheeler Parker here on Chicago Tonight just a couple of weeks ago as well to share part of that story. And we're thankful to have Donald Lassere joining us here on Chicago Tonight. Thank you and best of luck in the new position.
Thank you.
Up next, close encounters with a rather large insect. But first, a look at the weather.
The award for Best Documentary Feature at this year's Oscars went to My Octopus Teacher, about the close relationship a man develops with an octopus. That got our own Jay Shefsky thinking about a cross-species encounter of his own just last fall. Here's Jay.
This started like a lot of my favorite days, in a kayak on a quiet river. But soon it would get a lot more interesting. I was alone on the Paw Paw River, paddling out of Benton Harbor, Michigan. Wait, what is on that log? Is that a praying mantis? I don't think I've ever seen a praying mantis in person. Is it turning its head to watch me pass? I must be imagining that. I've got to get a closer look. So I turn around and sidle up to the fallen tree that is the praying mantis's perch. And this time, no doubt about it, it turns its head to face me. It is watching me. This giant insect that must have been the inspiration for the classic cartoon Alien is watching me. And it doesn't seem to be scared. At least not enough to fly away, or walk away, or whatever it would do. I'm a little scared, so before I get any closer, I Google, "Are praying mantises dangerous?" And I learned that while they can be quite rough on their prey, they're harmless to humans. So I get in closer, hoping to get a few shots before I scare it off. But it doesn't seem scared at all. It seems curious. I know, I shouldn't anthropomorphize this critter, but am I wrong to say that it seems every bit as interested in me as I am in it? Soon, I'm feeling ready to take our relationship to the next level. Will it read this gesture as a sign I can be trusted? Doesn't seem to make a difference. But then, after half an hour of just looking at each other, an amazing thing happens. It begins to approach. Tentatively at first, and then with a little more swagger. I'm glad I already confirmed that it's not a threat to me, because it's coming aboard. And then, for another half hour, it explores me and my kayak.
This is totally wild. There's a praying mantis on the bottom of my shoe that I can't even see it because it's on the bottom of my shoe.
It makes itself quite at home on this new perch. And soon it's ready to make the move to my hand.
That is the wildest thing.
But now I am in be careful what you ask for territory. Because while I know that this thing won't hurt me, it's tough to keep my cool as it moves from my hand to my arm.
Oh, that's getting a little creepy. Ooh, jeez.
Even though I get it back to more comfortable territory, this giant insect still wants to be better friends. And then, as it explores me, it manages to find the one place I can't film it, on my hand that is holding my phone.
This is inches from my face, sitting on the phone that is taking this picture of me. It is magnificent.
When have I ever spent this much time, this close, to a critter I encountered in the wild, and which I think has come to trust that I mean it no harm? Unfortunately, I betrayed that trust. And I'm sorry to say that the rest of the story happened off camera. Here are some photos from earlier as I tell you how it played out. The praying mantis spent several more minutes on my hand and then startled me by quickly walking up my arm toward my face. I instinctively flicked it off. It landed in the water where I watched it flail as the current carried it downstream. I was horrified, and I couldn't let my new friend drown, so I took off after it, eventually using the kayak paddle to gently scoop it out of the water. Then somehow, with that same paddle, I made my way to the shore, and here is my stunned friend on the paddle, just before I returned it to safety, and then watched it quickly take off into the brush. Did I teach it that humans can't be trusted? Maybe that's not a bad lesson. And what did it teach me? Something pretty simple, really. The benefits of quiet, patient observation. For Chicago Tonight, this is Jay Shefsky.
I don't know if I would have been that patient, but Jay tells us he learned later that there are 2,400 species of mantis, or mantid, around the world. They come in a wild variety. A few other fun facts. Many species can turn their heads 180 degrees. Ouch. The females have the charming habit of biting off the male's head after mating. Double ouch. Those dark spots in their eyes move to follow their prey. Some cultures attribute supernatural powers to them, and it is not uncommon to keep mantids as pets. Perhaps Jay will go find one at a pet store. And we're all grateful to Luke Viador for allowing us to use those photos that you just saw. What about it, Brandis? You interested?
Did you see the look that Mantis gave Jay when he first showed up?
Yeah, but you know, they built a trust, and I feel really bad about what happened, but at least the Mantis survived. Anyway, that's our show for this Monday night.
Please join us tomorrow night live at 7.
And we leave you tonight with some of today. I thought we were going to have some more Mantis footage, but apparently today's ceremony commemorating the 230th anniversary of the Polish-Lithuanian Constitution Day in Daley Plaza. Now for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning for this program is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, pleased to give back to the community through numerous charitable initiatives.